and I will hand it over to Amy.
Good evening, Amy Evan. I'm a senior research associate and school improvement specialist with Wested, and I'll share something personal. My daughter, we finally convinced her to try out for a play. They're doing it's an under the sea theme. I can't remember, but she not only got the role of Bubbles, but she's also uh, a jellyfish and something else. So they need a lot of cast members. So she got multiple roles, but she's so excited. She chickened out. I shouldn't probably say this, but she chickened out the first time and we convinced her just to go for it. And she did. And she ended up with 3 roles. So she's super psyched. And we hear the songs a lot, but it's better than recorder practice. So I'll take that. And I'll kick it over to Heather.
So I'm Heather Clayball. I am the Associate Superintendent of Fiscal Services for Frederick County Public Schools. And I love the Olympics, so I am super excited. I've spent most of the weekend watching the Olympics. And so I'm just happy that they're back, and it's a fun 2 weeks. And let's see. I will kick it over to Liz Smith.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry about that. It's we're finishing up dinner time at my house, putting the 2 kids, getting them to do what they need to do. I'm Liz Smith. I am the AIB. I am a Pillar 5 policy analyst. And I think I was the last one to go. I joined just a little bit late. Simone, have you gone yet?
Nope, I think I joined the same time you did. Hi everyone. So I am Simone Hall. I am the financial analyst for the AIB. And I think I'm the last one.
Chrislyn just joined. We can pass it to Chrislyn.
Yeah, Chrislyn, Vanessa, and Rachel too.
Hi, everybody. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I'm just getting in. Are we just introducing ourselves?
Yep, and sharing a good thing that's going on in your life, whether it's personal or professional.
Okay, so I'm Crystalline Thomas Davis. I am an adjunct professor and a literacy coach. And I presented in Philadelphia over the weekend to a lot of amazing teachers, and it was great.
Did you say Vanessa was next?
Yeah, sure.
Hi everyone, my name is Vanessa. I am one of the student members for this advisory committee. I also serve as the student member of the Board of Education for St. Mary's County Public Schools. A good thing happening in my life is I got a good grade on my stats quiz.
Love it. Congratulations. And I think I can round us out here. I'm Rachel Amstutz, the policy director here at the AIB. I'm going to be the weirdo and say that I still love the snow and the ice, and it just makes me happy to look outside and see it. I used to spend my winters in Wisconsin, where they know how to handle snow and ice, and I just love that it's not black, gunky stuff that we usually get here in Maryland after a couple of days, and I am enjoying that we're actually getting a little bit of winter. I know that makes many people dislike me, and that's okay, but I do enjoy a little bit of winter. I like having 4 seasons, and we don't always get them here, so it's been fun to build a fire and enjoy the weather. Mr. Liu, we'll pass it back to you to kick us off.
No, awesome. Thank you. I definitely agree. I grew up in Minnesota myself, and I love to just see a little bit glimpse of winter this year around. So I'm really happy too. But thank you everyone for the introductions. And today's topic is going to be Blueprint deep dive on CCR implementation and progress. But before we go more into that, Rachel, are there any general AIB updates that the committee should be aware of?
You know, I'm going to do what I've been doing in the past. I'm going to prime you for questions. If there's anything in particular that you do want to know about, I'm here to take any questions, but we don't want to take away from the meeting time. So I'll just remind you that we are in session. We're February already. Time is flying by, and there's a lot happening. If you want to keep up with us on our website, you'll be able to find the legislative updates and also the document that we've shared, I believe, since November, December-ish with the AIB legislative priorities. Later this week, I believe it's, and Liz or Simone, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm losing track of time over here. Later this week, I believe that our bill will be heard. Does that sound right? Is that this week? I think it's this week.
Yes.
I can get you that date. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think it's
And
Wednesday.
so thank you. Lots happening already with Blueprint there. So you probably, the easiest way to keep an eye on what's happening is to look for our legislative updates that come out. They will be posted to our website and emailed out to anybody who is on our email list, which is a great time to plug joining the AIB email list. So if you don't currently receive a monthly or bi-monthly update from us, I will get the link and drop it here, and we'll make sure that we close with that so that everyone knows how to stay informed and know what's happening here at the AIB. Other than that, there's a lot happening around Blueprint right now, but I'm going to go ahead and take questions if there are any, and we'll move this meeting along. Is there anything anybody's dying to know or that you've heard about or you're wondering about? Okay, if anything comes up, please let me know, and we'll go ahead and kick off for tonight's topic.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel. I'm going to share my screen for a moment. Can we all see this?
For me, it's loading. There we go.
All right. Can I have a volunteer read this just to keep us grounded in the purpose of the overall general blueprint?
Oh, Mr. Liu, these are words I know well. I've read them many a time. I'd be glad to do it tonight. The Blueprint for Maryland's Future is an unprecedented investment in Maryland's public education system that serves nearly 1 million pre-K to grade 12 students. It lays the foundation for early childhood into post-secondary education and training that is necessary for every child, regardless of where they live in our state, to receive a world-class education that prepares them for success in college, career, and life.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel. Couple words from this that's going to ground us on today's meeting is the term every child, which is bolded, and then also prepare them for success in college, career, and life. So today's focus is a mixture of different pillars. If you start the exact language is at the top there, subtask 3.2.1b. But just to intro this, as you all know, Blueprint Pillar 3 talks about college and career readiness, wanting all students to be ready once they graduate to be successful in the world. With the Blueprint especially requiring all students meeting the CCR standard by the end of 10th grade. And the Blueprint Pillar 4, talking about more reasons to ensure all students are successful. So students who are struggling, what is being done about it, what resources are available to help support them. And then going into Pillar 5, which is our Blueprint implementation deep dive onto CCR progress. How is progress being monitored on this aspect, CCR progress, accountability, not just identifying students, but also ensuring there is follow-through so they get the support they need. Can I have another volunteer read out the left part of subtask 3.2.1b, as that will ground our conversation for today?
I can read it. The left side,
Correct.
correct? LEA shall develop a process to identify all students who are struggling academically and provide them with necessary targeted intervention services as soon as possible.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jennifer. All right, before we get into that, Rachel, can I pass it on to you for just some brief information 101 on what exactly is CCR progress?
Sure. CCR progress and the CCR standard. I love that you started that with the word brief because there is no way to be very brief here. But I've got a couple talking points to focus us around this. And this is a really big concept in Maryland and in Blueprint that requires a nuanced understanding. So CCR stands for College and Career Ready. Essentially, we're working to ensure that every one of our students graduates ready for the next phase of their life. They're ready to either go into the workforce, they're ready to go into a community college program or a college program, or an apprenticeship or a trade school or service, or they're ready for what comes after high school. That's kind of like a no-brainer, right? Like that's what high school should be. When the Kirwan Commission met and when they were looking at the top performing systems around the world and the country, what they considered was, what if we backed that up a little bit? What if we looked at CCR by 10, college and career ready by 10th grade? And I want to clarify there, that doesn't mean they're done with 12th grade. It means we're looking at them at 10th grade.
Could you try again?
Sorry, my watch is talking to me a lot today, and I don't know why. Sorry if you heard that. The idea is that if we look at 10th grade, we've got 2 more years that if there's anybody who's not CCR ready, we've got time to intervene. And for those who are CCR ready, the Blueprint puts in more options for them. So unique to Maryland and unique to our Blueprint model, it's CCR by 10th grade. And in that, this required a look at the CCR standards. What do we mean by CCR by 10th grade? So those of you that have been following along for a couple of years might recall that MSDE did it's supposed to be an empirically based measure of CCR standards. So there was a study that was done that was set to be the initial CCR standards for English and math. In 2025, MSDE revised that to include a few more options, a few more pathways to demonstrate that students were CCR ready. And we will be providing these links in the PowerPoint after the session tonight. When this work was done, there were some things that were not completely finished in that. And that would be the alignment to making sure that those connected to being ready for community college, that there was a clear alignment from 12th grade to a community college entry course. So that's one piece that we're trying to reduce the amount of remediation that's required. So if you've been in education for a while, you've probably heard some statistics that a whole lot of kids get to community college and have to do remedial work in math, especially. Not only math, but especially in math. And so that tells us that there's a little bit of a breakdown between high school and community college. When the Kirwan Commission looked at that, they said, let's fix that. Let's figure out what the problem is so that when you leave high school, you're ready for the entry-level courses at the community college at a minimum. So that's the big difference between Blueprint and everybody else. And I will put a caveat here that in Maryland, that means we have to do both. The feds don't ask us about 10th grade. They don't care about 10th grade. That's a Maryland model that we at the AIB track, MSDE tracks, and the LEA tracks, so that we know that we have time to intervene and time to allow our students to explore more intentionally in high school once they are CCR ready. I want to pause there and see if there's any questions on that part, CCR by 10. Does that make sense? Okay, so then if we're CCR by 10, there's kind of 2 pathways. Either you are or either you're not ready by 10th grade. That also, I just want to put a little star there, doesn't mean that we don't look at you in 9th grade and 8th grade and 7th and 6th and 3rd and kinder. There is an expectation in the Blueprint that we are monitoring all kids for CCR. Are they on grade level? Are they on track? Do they need intervention, remediation, or extension? If students are struggling, the sooner we intervene, the sooner we are able to get them back on course. But 10th grade is that real mile marker. If you are ready by 10th grade, you have options open that are called post-CCR pathways. So a student who meets any of the criteria that are listed in the current document, which we'll get you the link to what the current options are, those students are able to choose to take AP classes, IB classes, Cambridge classes, all of those which can earn college credit. They can take dual enrollment classes, at least 60 credits is what the law says, at least. It's a current, we're not at least just right now, but we will be getting there as Blueprint implementation deepens. All of these are the options for students who are demonstrating college and career readiness at 10th grade, that they can then jump in and start earning credits that apply to both college and high school, so that they are able to maximize their high school experience and to explore what's of interest to them in their career pathways. What college programming might they be looking at if college is the pathway for them? What careers might they be looking at? Or is there an apprenticeship? Is there an industry recognized credential or a CTE program that they might be interested in? And so those are for our students who are on track for CCR by 10th grade. We have a document, which I think we're going to share links tonight to, that's called the 9th grade tracker. So every year, every district needs to do a data submission to MSDE, and MSDE compiles it across the 24 districts and submits it to the AIB, that shows us the rate of students on track for CCR in 9th grade. Again, this gets complicated. It's different than what the feds measure. It's Maryland's measure of what we believe we need to be tracking to make sure that our 9th graders are ready. We look at course failure, we look at number of credits earned, and we look at chronic absenteeism. So these are some themes that you see that extend into other metrics that we monitor as well. But we believe that these are really critical factors to students being ready for, to be demonstrating readiness for CCR. So you're going to see other numbers. MSDE is going to be also showing you what the feds ask for. And that's going to include like graduation rates and cohort graduation rates and 5-year graduation rates. There's a whole lot of numbers that swim out there around being CCR ready. The purpose of tonight's conversation is really thinking about how Blueprint looks at that. And so there's a lot of data that we can put out there for you. There's a lot of data on our dashboards that you can drill down statewide and then down to each county. And then you can also look at this by student groups. So I've mentioned about the kids who are on track. They are meeting the right number of credits that they've earned. Their attendance is looking good, and they are the third thing, they are CCR ready. They're demonstrating that they're CCR ready. So then we have some students who aren't quite there, and that's another focus of tonight's session. So when students are struggling to demonstrate that they are CCR ready, the Blueprint requires intentional focus on those students, specific, intentional, targeted focus on individual kids. It requires that that student has an adult that is looking at them, looking at their case, seeing what's missing. What is it? Is it attendance? Because if it's attendance, we can fix that pretty quick. We can dig in and figure out what's causing that. Is it course failure? We need to look in and figure out why. We've got to, it's not just take that same class again and hope we do better. We need to figure out how and why we need to do better. So Blueprint makes the expectation much more rigorous, that there are systems in place in the districts and in the schools that are monitoring student performance and digging deep and connecting with that student and hopefully their family to make a plan, and that there are adults in the school that are specifically working with, talking with, following that particular student and making a plan with them to help support them. The idea with students who have not yet reached CCR is that we want to intervene swiftly and we want to intervene in a targeted way. We don't want to just say, let's take algebra 3 times and hopefully you'll like it better by the 3rd time you take it. We need to figure out what the block is that's making it hard to get that high school credit. So one thing that I want to make very clear is that meeting the CCR standard is not required to graduate from Maryland. You can graduate and not meet the CCR standard because you meet the high school graduation standard in Maryland. That high school graduation standard has been in place for a while. It is what is expected to require to be able to graduate. What we're doing with Blueprint is saying we would like for our students to graduate ready to walk into their next step without remedial courses. So this is a marker that we've put in place to track students and to be able to support them while they're still in high school, while we still have 2 more years with them, to be able to get the supports needed to be able to become CCR ready and access all of the other incredible resources that Blueprint offers them. Dual enrollment, additional college credits while they're earning high school credits, APIB Cambridge, all of those things, apprenticeships, etc. I'm going to pause here again because this stuff gets really complicated. You can graduate and not be deemed CCR ready. Does that feel okay? Any questions on that?
Yes, one question, Rachel. I do know all of the metrics, looking at TCR standard readiness is while the student is in high school. Is there any work or data being collected once our students graduate and are in the workforce, college, etc., years down the line?
I love it. And yes, what I can tell you is that the Maryland Longitudinal Data Systems Center does track all of this data, and that yes, between them and the 3 state agencies involved, there's definitely a plan to capture these things, and it is something that is being monitored and is critical to being able to see Blueprint success overall. I don't have any particular numbers to give you, but yes, to the question that there is a plan in place to be monitoring that. And the deeper we get, the more questions that we're asking, and we're saying, hey, what are the research questions that we really want to ask about Blueprint? And that's something that my team's been working on as well. Crystalline?
Hi. So if a student is deemed to not be college and career ready, will that show up on any of their paperwork, any transcripts, or will that just be sort of like an in-house sort of marker?
That is a great question. I cannot answer that with confidence. I do not believe it shows up on anything like their high school graduation, like transcripts and things like that. There are internal documents, and actually it's a great lead into the next piece. Each of the districts are required to develop, and actually MSDE is developing a template for a 6-year plan, which includes their career counseling and their career, kind of their exploration and pathways and what they're doing, that they revise it every year as they experiment. So, some of us thought, not me, that we might enjoy being in the medical field. And then you go have an experience and you see blood and you're like, hey, not my thing, rather not do this. That's a very valuable learning experience in high school to have, instead of going to college, taking 9 classes and realizing this is not for me and having to start over. So the 6-year plan is kind of meant to let them identify their interests in middle school, and to start thinking about what courses, what pathways they might think they're headed in, and then to begin experimenting with that. It also tracks CCR readiness and just where they are with that. So I think, to your question, my soft answer that I'm not going to commit entirely to would be that there are definitely internal pieces. And one of the talking points that I have at the end is how parents can know more about this and how families and students can know about this. So we will end on that when I finish here. But then I do not believe that it gets marked on anything official that would be sent anywhere else with your transcript, as far as I know. I am going to take that back as a question because that's a really great question. And I want to make sure I get you the right answer. So I will follow up on that. Vanessa, question.
I think I could provide some insight to that
Please.
question. From in St. Mary's County, the CCR checkpoint does show up on my transcript. So it shows up on, yes, it does. So I don't know if this is a county specific thing, but it's
okay.
Yeah, for my county, we also show, if like we show like MISA, we show state testing on our transcript as well.
Yes.
So yeah, but it shows, I looked at my transcript, it shows CCR ready. So
Okay.
it says yes or no.
And Vanessa, it says yes or no. Okay, that's very, very helpful. I will confirm if that's like that in all 24 or not, and I'll let the committee know, and then we'll bring that back next time. But thank you for letting us know that. Okay, so we've talked about when they are CCR ready and when they're not. I do want to mention that another kind of set of words that you will hear around Blueprint that connects to this is that in order to have a CCR standard, the state has to ensure that each of the districts have an aligned instructional system and methods for monitoring student progress towards CCR. So you'll remember that 2 years ago and 3 years ago, the LEAs were submitting their implementation plans, Blueprint Blueprint implementation plans, and now they are implementing those and have been having progress monitoring meetings. If you are interested in seeing any of those counties, they are on our website under the implementation plan page. You can go back and find both of their plans where they do talk about their aligned instructional systems. They also are supported by now literacy plans. And just recently at our last board meeting, the math plans were now added to our website. So you can see what that aligned instructional system looks like, what curriculum they're using, what interventions they use, what their scope and sequence looks like. All of those resources are on our website and their websites, of course, but we've got it compiled on ours for all 24. There was another piece in this, which it's a big year here. 2026 is a very big year. You mentioned MISA, which is the Maryland Science Assessment. There's also MCAP, the Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program, which if you're a parent, you have had students taking the math and reading assessments 3rd grade through 8th grade plus high school. And then you've also had them taking the science assessment in 5th, 8th, and maybe later in high school. That entire program was put out for bid and is being redone. We have learned that, as you'll remember, that there was a transition to Common Core about 10 or 15 years ago, and then there was the transition to the Maryland Common Standards, and we maintained the same comprehensive assessment program in that transition. We have realized that it is not well aligned to our current standards, so it was put out for rebid, and a new vendor has been identified, and a brand new assessment program will be beginning next year, I believe. There is some information we can put out with that, and at our last AIB meeting in January, I believe, Dr. Wright shared some information about that. So that is available on our website, or our team could provide some information if anybody has any questions about that. But that's all involved in the CCR standard. So the CCR standard tells us what they need to know, and then we have the assessments that are measuring student progress and how well they're doing towards mastery of the standards. So we'll have the data that lets us know when to intervene. The LEAs have these 9th grade tracking systems that lets them be able to know how students are doing. And then the LEAs are then required to develop a process to identify all students who are struggling academically and to provide them with targeted intervention services as soon as possible. And those are aligned to the CCR standard. This means that each of the LEAs needs to have a functioning and I would say highly coordinated, highly functioning MTSS system. So MTSS is the multi-tiered system of supports. It's where teachers are able to refer students that they have concerns for that are before we would maybe refer for, say, an IEP or a 504 evaluation. We're starting to see that a student is not making the expected progress, and we need a whole team to sit down and dig in and look at the data and figure out what might be needed. In addition to MTSS, we also have LEAs and community colleges who are collaborating to support some of those targeted interventions as well. Across the state, we have several community colleges who support our LEAs with intervention for high school kids, that they've had a proven success with being able to support, especially in math, students who are struggling. And so they're able to use their pathways and their programs to allow high school students to get that support at the community college, which is one great example where we're seeing some collaboration between Blueprint partners. There was a second question that was the team posed to me to come and bring some information about, which was about the accountability expectations around LEAs and specifically what districts are required to implement and report. And of those, starting in the fall 2026, so we don't have this previously, but coming this fall, the LEAs will be reporting the number of students who meet CCR by the end of 10th grade and the number of students, or the percentage of students who meet CCR by the end of high school. They have been for multiple years, 3 or 4, reporting the 9th grade tracker data. That data is available on our website for each of the years if you look at Blueprint progress and then reports submitted to the AIB. The most recent data was submitted to us in December and is posted and available there for review. And then also remember that the federal and other state reports do report additional information, which includes the school report card, how schools are doing. We have the MCAP proficiency, which we have dashboards on our website, and the Maryland Report Card website, which gives you English, math for grades 3 to 8, and then the certain high school courses, as well as graduation and dropout rates and English language proficiency. And then all of those can be filtered and sorted by school group. In terms of the accountability, there are the aligned metrics that we look at that's between the AIB, MSDE, and the governor's office that set the standard for what we're anticipating and describing as the goal that we want to see. There are also metrics that we are monitoring and following to make sure that each of the LEAs are on track for the student groups and for the whole groups and by each content area as well. MSDE, let's see here. If we move on, the last question that I have is, how would a family and or students know about where their student is? If this is new information to them, that there is a blueprint CCR metric, and then there's also what we've always had with high school graduation and the assessment programs. And so if you're curious about knowing about this, the best place is going to be your school for sure. MSDE certainly does statewide communication with folks, and they are responsible for providing that communication with families and students about the CCR standard and with developing resources that the LEAs can share that. The high schools do a great job of giving that out typically, and you can find it on the MSDE website and hopefully your county and high school websites as well. Then the LEAs are responsible for really identifying the students who are not on track for CCR and or graduation and developing those intervention plans. A key component of those intervention plans has to be working with the families, pulling families in and letting them know. So that is an expectation built into that process as well. One particular point that someone on the committee asked was, what about for LEAs, what do the LEAs have to do according to the Blueprint Comprehensive Plan 3.2.1b, where it talks about LEAs shall develop a process to identify all students who are struggling academically and provide them with necessary targeted intervention services as soon as possible that are aligned to the CCR standard. So basically, when we think about this, we're really thinking that the schools are looking individually at students at this level. So there may be a variety of circumstances. And Mr. Liu, I love that you opened us with the slide about every student, no matter where they live, no matter the language they speak, no matter what, every single student, we're going to be looking at them individually. And I'm going to read you a list here. It is not dependent on their family standing up and advocating for them, teachers advocating or saying this child needs more help or not. It's not subjective. It's not unintentionally disadvantaging any particular student of any race, color, language that they speak, students with disabilities, those who are coming from poverty, that all of these data points are out there and that they should be used to be looking at individual students and to identify students who are struggling as early as possible. So we also know that interventions are not one size fits all. So we have to be intentionally pairing the intervention with the student to make sure that we are giving them the support or the resource that they need, not just putting them in a particular group because it checks the box, that the intervention is matched to the child and that it's implemented with fidelity. And then the LEAs align these supports to the CCR standards to ensure that they are culturally and linguistically responsive, developmentally appropriate, and delivered by trained staff. We also know that we've got to keep an eye on disproportionality. And so the state has many metrics. We monitor that. MSDE monitors that. We are looking at identification for students who are identified for special education. And we're trying to make sure that students are appropriately identified for education. for special education. And then also that we need to be keeping a very close eye on how our LEAs are providing supports and matching the needs to those struggling learners. And so MTSS, and the processes are supporting the students and that they're being followed with fidelity. So one thing I can tell you, and then I'll take more questions, is that in working with the 3 LEAs who received notice letters in December, they have tasks to do to turn into the AIB around root cause analysis for any particular student group that was flagged as not making growth in that 4-year window. And that's what they're doing right now. At the district level, they're looking at systems and structures, and at every individual school that had a decrease in student performance in a particular student grade level and content area, or a student group, say a multilingual learner 3rd grade reading group of students, they are digging deep right now and looking back at that data with a new lens to wonder and determine what are the root causes of this and what's within our control. What actions can we take to turn this around? They've been doing that phenomenally. They were already doing a lot of that work, and now that they were asked to relook at it, they've reconvened teams and they are digging in and already making significant changes there. So I want to be clear that this is work that has been done in schools, that the continuous school improvement process is something that every school goes through annually. But now with the blueprint lens, there's a deeper set of considerations that we're looking at. Mr. Liu, I would even tie this, I think you had pillar 5 here, yes. My tie to pillar 5 would be that one of the blueprint expectations is that the money follows the kids to the schoolhouse, and that we're looking at how the money supports any of these kids individually. And so if students come from poverty, if they're in a community school that is receiving additional grant funds because it's a concentration of poverty school, how are those funds being used, not just for the whole school, but now we're saying, how are they being used for these kids? How are they being used for the targeted population that is not on path to be CCR by 10th? How are they being used for the 3rd grade multilingual learner group who isn't making progress? That is now in the principal's purview, and that's something that our districts need to be considering. It's not just concentration of poverty. It would be the same for the funds that follow a student because they receive multilingual learner services or special education services. So this topic gets pretty deep pretty quickly, and it does span multiple pillars. I could make arguments that it connects to 1 and 2 as well, especially as we think about our teachers and their readiness and knowledge and skill set to be able to remediate and to identify students who need extra support and to do something different for them. This gets into why we lean into national board certification, that teachers know their students and they know their content and they know how to repair when students have slipped behind, that they can catch them up. So Mr. Liu, I cannot be brief on this topic. I tried, but it's big. There's a lot more to tell you. So I'm going to pause and take any questions and then pass it back to you. Are there any questions on all of that?
Rachel, I had one quick question. Given that each LEA is choosing their own curriculum, and it sounds like their strategy for determining whether students are on track for college and career readiness or not, how are we looking across the state to compare students in St. Mary's County versus Charles County versus Anne Arundel versus Wacomico? Like, how does that work at a state level in seeing how many students are on track for that college and career readiness by 10th grade or not?
So I kind of have a partial answer, and then I have a dream. So this every year in December, the AIB receives the 9th grade tracker data. And I've been here since the beginning, and every year I read this. And I'm like, what's happening? And I'm a math teacher. And so, Mr. Liu, you know how that is. You give us data, and we're like, I have 4 million questions. And we spend some time looking at it. We share it with our team. A couple of us kind of kick it around and look and see what we wonder, what stands out, what are we noticing, and what do we wonder? And we typically have some conversations with our colleagues at MSDE. In these early years, they've been data points. They've been the starting point, right? There are baseline data. If I'm honest, as an educator, it pains me to look at those data points. I would like to see our students doing significantly better than where they are, but that's why we're here. We're here to transform our education system. We are now at the point where my team is saying, we'd like to ask more questions about this. This data is great, and now we need to know more. So we are looking at that data submission and wondering, now that Blueprint is further along into implementation, perhaps that report that we wrote about in 2023 in the BCP, perhaps it's time to make it a little bit more robust. So we are looking at expanding that report and doing a bit more. Internally, we do a whole lot of wondering. And now we need to formalize what you're asking about how do we take that curiosity to what are they doing over here? What are they doing over here? What's working? How do we share what's working across? I can tell you that when we saw a couple things flag, there were 2 that really stood out with chronic absenteeism. So we said, hey, these are different than the rest. And so what do we do about that? So we took that back to MSDE and said, hey, we're curious. We noticed this. What is your plan to support these 2 LEAs? With the MOU between the AIB and MSDE, that would fall squarely in their land. Like it's our land to look at the data. It's their land to know chronic absenteeism. And so they told us that they had a partnership with IndexWorks and that they were kind of tackling chronic absenteeism with all 24. And we suggested that maybe those 2 needed something special. So could they look into supporting the 2 that really stood out and seeing if there were commonalities among them or if there was any way to provide additional supports and resources? And we passed that to MSDE for their expertise and their support. So I would say we're kind of in a middle land where we look at the data, we wonder, now we think we need to upgrade our reporting progress to not just be the data, but the now what? Now that we have this data, what's our next step with this? Does that help for now?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think too, there's an answer that I can't tell you about what MSDE does with that. So I will go back to them and get their answer about what they do with that, because they have a lot more role in that implementation part of it. We have the role more in the, let's look at that data, let's dig in, let's wonder, and then we collaborate with our partners there to wonder together.
Thanks, Rachel.
Any other questions on all that information about CCR by 10, how we support students who are not yet CCR, and the things that are available to the students who are CCR to maximize their high school? And I do want to say this was intentional and put into the blueprint on purpose to make high school a bit more engaging, a bit more useful, that maybe students don't take off a lot of their senior year because they've achieved the minimum number of credits that they need to graduate, but maybe instead they're at the community college or they're at an apprenticeship or they're at a CTE program and they're earning industry recognized credentials. Blueprint wants students to have a lot of really rich experiences in high school that let them kind of figure out early, I think I'm headed this way. I think I'm headed that way. I want to try this class and not just take, we joke, we say they shouldn't take basket weaving. We don't mean any harm against basket weaving. It just gets a bad rap in things sometimes. But we want them to take intentional series of courses that count for credit so that their families and they do not have to pay for those credits when they get to college. So if they're more intentional in their planning in middle school and high school, we believe that they can actually get their post-secondary things done faster and at a cheaper expense because the state paid for it and the counties paid for it while they were in high school. So there's a whole fiscal component here too that Blueprint tries to give students a lot more opportunities in high school to be able to explore and set them up so that they walk into their next step ready to go.
I have a question. I think Mr. Liu's question earlier hinted at what's been on my mind, and that is a question about the validity of the measures for CCR. And you said that MLDS was tracking those data. Do we know what the data is showing? Do we have the confidence that when we deem a student to be CCR ready, that in fact that student is going to go on to do well in whatever is the next thing?
Liz, I'm going to look to you for a second to see if you have any thoughts on that. And then I'm going to broadly say that, Dr. Prime, that is a fabulous question. And I'm going to have to get back to you on most of it. But Liz, do you have anything to add in on that one?
So to my knowledge, I don't know, and I have not been at the AIB very long. I don't think a lot of this was based off sort of how those students are doing, but I was just talking to my supervisor because we do have that sort of longevity view, right? We can see how our kids who go to community college and go to our four-year universities in Maryland, how they do. So the kids that we said CCR ready, did they need to take remedial classes? I used to work in DC, which did not have that long view because there aren't a lot of state colleges in DC. So I'm like, to have that information and not be using it is wild to me. So I think that is something that is very much on our minds of how are we tracking it? Are we sort of backtracking and double checking that our measures are accurate and valid? But to my knowledge, it's not happening yet. And Rachel,
the one thing I would add to that, Liz, is that it's not happening yet because there's a lag in reporting data. So the LEAs have the data very timely. It gets reported, but like when we go to pull dual enrollment numbers right now, we're looking at the 22-23 school year, I think it is. So we're still dealing in data that's early implementation. So Dr. Prime, we have a lot of conversations internally about data access, the availability of data, and what we need to do to be able to get more timely data to make more timely decisions and to understand how it's impacting. So I would say there is a plan to track that. It's just that it's reported out. Right now, you'd be getting reports of what was happening the very first year when we were writing implementation plans, where we weren't putting kids in classes. We weren't tracking, like we weren't implementing yet. And so this has been, as Liz noted, it's not unique to Maryland that this is a problem to get access to that data. We are very fortunate to have the MLDSC Center and to have these agreements where the interagency data is available to be looked at. That's the whole purpose of MLDS, where it's crossing over the different agencies. And now we probably have an opportunity with Blueprint to fine tune it and to help make that data more timely and more useful. But there definitely are some super smart people that work over there and are wondering about how to run these data. And then as we talked about in December, I finished my doctorate in December, and we are now starting to submit some research grants. And so my team, our teams that are working on this, both accountability and policy, we're kind of developing those big picture research questions and trying to figure out where we go now that we have some of this data. And then also we got to figure out how we get that data more quickly. But great question and definitely on our mind. And I would say that the phases of Blueprint implementation, we are deep in it now. We were early on in that implementation phase, but we are deep in it. And this research piece of it is now becoming so much more important that we can track our progress. Great question. I wrote it down, and I will see if I get any more information for you from our colleagues over at MLDS.
And congratulations on finishing the doctorate.
Took a while, but thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Appreciate all the questions. I really want to dedicate the next 30 or so minutes we have two wonderful panelists that are here to join us to talk about everything we were just talking about. Could I first have Dr. Kathy and Larique, do you guys both mind introducing yourselves to the whole group?
Sure. Hi, my name is Kathy Gull. I am a director of curriculum and instruction in Frederick County Public Schools, and I have a co-director, and so we oversee all of the large programs. Like I oversee CTE, multilingual education, early childhood education, literacy, pre-K to 12, and world languages. So lots of different programs. And I work very closely with my colleagues across different departments to do all of the things and operationalize all the things that you were just having a conversation about. So I look forward to getting into the conversation.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Dr. Captigo. Larry, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Laree Siddiqui. I am the coordinator of post-secondary access and digital education for Howard County Public Schools. Currently, I oversee our Jumpstart dual enrollment program, as well as comprehensive career counseling. So I spend a lot of time in the land of Blueprint, especially in our Pillar 3, and then digital education for our district as well. And I'm excited to share this evening.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, Early, and thank you, Dr. Gold, for joining us, and thank you for your guys' patience as we are wrapping up with our previous agenda items. Larry, I understand you may have a presentation. Dr. Gold, you may as well, but I just want to ask as the first question to you guys, as you guys have been listening to our conversation for the past 20, 30 minutes, what's your responses and what's your thoughts related to directly the work that you do in your respective school systems?
That's a big question. I do not have a presentation, but I do have some thoughts about, gosh, I think Rachel went, like she said, she went deep. She really did. So when you talk about challenges, let's talk about removing some barriers for students. The majority of my career was spent in the multilingual education program. Previously, I was the supervisor of ME in Frederick County. And so when we think about challenges and we think about the importance of all of our students becoming CCR, for our ML students, we run a special program in the summer where there are smaller class sizes and it's co-taught between a content teacher and an ML expert, an ML teacher, so that the students receive language support and content in a smaller space, and with just one class. So they're only focused on that one class, and they could do it for original credit or they can do it for credit recovery. So something like that supports our students in achieving CCR because they can take an algebra class, or they can take a different course that might be more linguistically dense, and get that support in that environment. And so it's having to think of things like that that will help remove some barriers for our kiddos and help all of our students achieve CCR. So Larry, if you want to do this like a conversation and just kind of go back and forth, I'm happy to do it that way. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that sounds great. I think dovetailing on the questions is a great place to kind of start. And I did share some information. I'm happy to share it out at the end just with a link as well. So I also very much appreciate the focus on data and leveraging that on track by, to hit the CCR indicator is so important, because where we are in Howard County, we want to make sure that we are meeting our students exactly where they need us to. And so how can we best do that? We've been actually this year, we've implemented a multi-tiered system of support specifically around the structure and function of our career counseling initiative, where we have our tier 1 curriculum embedded supports that all of our students are getting, and as well as dovetailing that into some more specifically intentional kind of outcomes and opportunities for students and programming for students who are currently multilingual learners, or currently receiving special education services, or are currently not being in danger of not being on track to meet CCR. I want to, we talked a little bit about accountability. What Howard County is actually doing is we have the dashboard that monitors progress to CCR. We have an early warning dashboard that starts in 8th grade, where we can identify those students who are in danger of not being on track. We start intentional vertical articulation supports with those groups of 8th grade students, and we deploy our high school. We have a split staffing model for our career counseling. So we have career readiness advisors. Those are trained educators through Howard County Public Schools, and we augment those with our 13 career counselors from Office of Workforce Development, career coaches. And those trained educators, because Rachel did mention very specifically, we want to make sure that these students are receiving interventions from trained educators. And so our trained educators are starting that process, and we're starting it early, and we're using, blueprint data as our North Star, and then back mapping it to be as proactive as possible. So.
Loree, I appreciate that you talked about data at a macro level. I think about a process that we do in Frederick County where we empower our teachers to understand and analyze data. We have something called the Accelerated Learning Process. We call it ALP. And teachers participate in that on a regular basis. And the components of ALP are teachers will analyze their students' data. We have, and it's a team. So we have our multilingual teachers, we have our special education teachers, our specialists, and our either content teachers, or if it's elementary, the grade level. And they bring data to the conversation. They co-analyze the data. Then they look at the standard, and they really dissect the standard so that they deeply understand it. And then they do something called instructional design, where they plan specifically for the students that they are analyzing that data. So based on data, they make instructional decisions. And then when they come back to the next ALP, they bring evidence of learning or an evidence of success. And so looking at data macro across the district is really important, but empowering our educators and teachers in the classrooms to understand that data is really where we see we're moving the needle in deeply understanding the standards, understanding where their students are, and then planning instructional design around that. So we have seen a lot of success in ALP. We have central office folks who will go and participate and just be a part of the conversation so that we can hear what's happening, and that way we can support our principals through professional learning on facilitating ALP conversations. And so I think that macro level is really important, but so is that micro level in the classroom and empowering our teachers to be data literate. We also looked at our structures internally at central office. I think about, I think it's Claire who says that you don't raise to the level of your goals, you sink to the level of your structures. And so we were looking at our structures internally. And in the Department of Curriculum Instruction, we restructured so that we could kind of coalesce around the literacy work across disciplines. And so we have our elementary team is an elementary integrated literacy team that looks at not just ELA, but science and social studies, because we're talking about building background knowledge and kind of that science of learning. So we have a whole team of central office folks who are focused on a comprehensive, like, elementary student day from beginning to end. And how do we leverage that? Because early is so important. Early intervention, early identification is really critical for us to reach that CCR at that 10th grade level. So we have that at the elementary level, but we also have it at the secondary level, where we have a secondary literacy team that is focused on ELA, but also doing cross disciplines literacy work with our supervisor of social studies, supervisor of science. So Loree, I would be super interested in kind of some central office structures and data analysis that you all do in the classroom. I love learning from other counties.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple different things that we've done this year in our school improvement planning process at the central office level. We have basically kind of included and wrapped into all of that the on-track components, so that data actually starts to be visited by the middle school administrators in collaboration with the middle school counselors that are, supporting the students as they transition to high school. So that is built in, and again, early and often, right, as far as the identification goes. The second piece that's been embedded, systemically into our school improvement plan is a very intentional focus on effective first instruction, and how are we measuring effective first instruction. And so we've been working with our central office and our administrator teams to put together kind of a common walkthrough tool that all of our schools can use so that we can measure what that effective first instruction is looking like, and then also gathering, kind of those immediate assessments, bringing it back and evaluating where the students are and where we might need to push in. And then alternatively, as we are not in addition to, right, as we are looking and drilling into the data, are there trends that need to be addressed with particular student groups when it comes to a specific content component? Years ago, when I was running, when I started the Jumpstart Dual Enrollment Program for HCPSS, we consistently saw that students were not placing into Howard Community Colleges their college level math classes, their statistics, their Math 138. And so we actually picked apart the placement test results of all dual enrollment students and tried to really narrow in on where were some of the challenging areas, where was the struggle with mastery, because what we found is that it wasn't specific to one particular teacher, right? It was, the content is hard. And we put together a series of support structures for the kids to move through. I envision us doing something very, very similar as we get, more and more information from where our students are, as far as if they are not on track, and they're not on track because they are not being successful in their 9th grade English class. What do we need to do to really shore up those core skills as we're doing those intentional interventions? And then are those interventions, to your point, you need to create the data champions at the school. You need to create the people who, and data is overwhelming to a lot of people, right? The data for one school can be, 2,000 different data points if you've got 2,000 kids in a building. How can you create, data champions and people who are comfortable with that? So our Office of Strategic Planning and Accountability has actually worked over the last 2 years to get a data champion, at least one in every single building, in a leadership role, either an ITL or an administrator that's really, becoming quite comfortable with it, so that as we scale this out, there will be less of a learning curve on the part of the adults. So that's what we're doing centrally, as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Larry. Dr. Kathy, I had one follow-up question for you to ask. I really appreciate everything you shared about, collaboration, teacher-led teams, running the ALT meetings. Question for you. Can you speak more about the support structures that you guys put in place to empower teachers, leaders to have those meetings? And then from like a district level, how do you measure, what metrics are you using to determine how effective, successful these ALT meetings are towards positively impacting some of those struggling students?
Absolutely. So data literacy can be very challenging, especially when you think about new teachers or conditional teachers. You think about all the different things that they have to learn, the HQIM, those high quality instruction materials, classroom management, all of those things. So we have a program where we support our newer teachers through, it's called RISE, but it's a support program. But part of that is data literacy and understanding, truly understanding what they're seeing from their students. So whether it's formative assessments or summative assessments. So we have a literacy specialist and a math specialist in every building. At the high school level, they're academic specialists, and they are not only experts in the content, but they're also experts in understanding the data and what that means. And so those experts facilitate ALP conversations for, let's say, teams that have more new teachers than not, or veteran teachers. And so those are really big support for us. We also have been doing that first instruction, tier 1 instruction within our MTSS model. We have also written a strategic plan around MTSS that really grounds our work. And so within tier 1, we have done a year-long professional learning session with all administrators. So all of our principals, all of our assistant principals, our coordinators, even our teacher specialists, our 11-month teacher specialists, they have all participated in professional learning about tier 1 instruction and how the ALP process supports tier 1 instruction. And so that is ongoing, right? We're always going to be getting new teachers. And so it's important that we continue that work. And so that's why professional learning is so critical for your teachers and all the way up to your instructional leaders, which are your principals.
Oh, thank you, Dr.
I'd like to, I was just going to say, Dr. Gold, we onboard our new teachers in a very similar fashion, and our Office of Leadership Development has the new educator cohort so that they, you know, and again, we've built in the data literacy to kind of those standard operating procedures for the district to get everyone just, you know, more comfortable. And it looks different at each school as far as what those meetings might look like, or who's, you know, and who, when I say who's in the room, you've got the same players in the room, but what the focus might be, because one school community might have something that's a different focus area.
I know you guys have both talked a lot about, you know, not just the micro, but also the macro system level. Can you guys share more about some of the system level challenges that you guys have faced in your work and what support, if any, you would appreciate to have?
Louis, do you want to go first this time?
Teed me up good for that one. Thank you. No, of course. So what I will say is that, you know, Blueprint, I really love watching Rachel's face when she talks about that first slide about Blueprint, because it is a big lift. This is a sweeping piece of education reform legislation. It is, and there are so many different moving parts. And so how can you turn like a huge container ship around on a dime? And the answer is that you can't, right? It is, you can't without causing a huge wave. And so waves need to be made, and it's managing the change and managing the process. And so it's those challenges really early on. One, we're getting the community to understand what Blueprint was and why ultimately it was going to be beneficial for our students and for our staff. And so we did some very intentional outreach as Blueprint ramped up so that everybody was aware, and we tried to, you know, make sure that our community members were also aware and having input into the processes. So I would say that certainly, you know, systemically is, and that goes for the work across all 4 pillars. The majority of my work certainly has been limited a bit more to pillar 3 and a little bit of pillar 4. But that goes for each, you know, each of the pillars. And then also being sure to like pull on the thread to say, you know, we need pre-K, right? So that students are reading by grade 3. And when they are reading by grade 3, that they are going to be able to meet, you know, and really draw the thread all the way through, all the way up to recruiting the absolute best teachers that Maryland possibly can find. And so how we manage that well is to kind of draw that narrative all the way through. But it is always a challenge. We're adapting and adjusting existing systems and processes. The other piece I would say is have the more nimble, and I use that jokingly because if you've ever engaged with a student information system, it is not often the most nimble, you know, resource where you are tracking all of these different data metrics. And so being sure that first and foremost, your infrastructure for tracking data is strong, that will lay the foundation for all the other pieces to grow and be successful. So that's my two.
I think about all of the pieces of the puzzle. I think about pillar 1, 2, 3, 4, all of the different pieces within each of those pillars. And I think about all of the plans. I think about the strips. If you are struggling in the early grades with reading, those intervention plans that are required. I think about the adolescent literacy policy. So in my role, understanding the blueprint, understanding all of the pieces that I'm working with and all the people on the teams that I'm working with, I think crossing and collaborating across departments is critical. It is absolutely critical that the folks who are running the student information system are regularly speaking with my folks who are implementing the HQIM, who are supporting not only teachers, but teacher leaders and principals with that, who are looking at data, who are having those out conversations. That collaboration across departments, I think Blueprint has really highlighted the critical need to do that. And we have, I would say FCPS has done that well and has really worked hard to get multiple voices with multiple expertise in the same room to be able to do that at each of the levels, at the central office level, at the school level, and across schools. So feeder meetings to talk about the community those schools are serving is really important. So that communication is really critical. The career coach program, the career counseling initiative, I sit on that leadership team with our higher ed partners, our community school partners, as well as our workforce services. And that collaboration has been, it has been really fun to watch it evolve over the last couple of years. We came from such different places, really, and now those entities are really working well and communicating well together, all in service of our students and our community. And so that is, I would say that it's required work, right? It's really been a lot of energy and a lot of effort, but now we're seeing that collaboration happen to the benefit of our students and those career coaches making a difference. Our career coaches are all being trained on administering ASVAB. Now with the CCR standard expanding to incorporate different elements, that has enabled us to kind of think creatively about how to help our students reach CCR. And that's just one of the things that we're doing that will expand access for our kids. So I didn't really answer your question, I think, Mr. Liu. I told you kind of some of the challenges, but also the benefits of working through those challenges, right? So I can really see us gaining momentum with Blueprint and operationalizing it in our schools.
Oh, no, appreciate it very much. Oh, go ahead, Lorraine.
Yeah, I just wanted to, and I'm not just saying this because Rachel's here, but one thing that I really want to applaud AIB and MSDE for doing is that they're also listening. They are bringing, just like what Kathy said about that, like ongoing and very intentional collaboration within the district, leaning on other district partners as well, outside maybe of your district, but just to kind of problem solve or talk through any of those challenges. But what's been great is, again, I wear my dual enrollment hat. It was the original hat I wore as an educator. And I was sitting on several of those advisory panels for Blueprint around dual enrollment. And in talking through Howard County's model, that actually wound up having a little bit of, like informing the decisions that AIB and MSDE made when adding the additional post-CC, the CCR indicators, right? Students being successful in a college level English and a college level math class. And so it is a little bit easier to do when you're trying to move a big system around, when the even bigger system of the AIB and MSDE are also taking feedback intentionally and using it to inform future decisions. That is very, very helpful. So.
Awesome. Thank you both. Also, I had more questions, but I just wanted to open the floor to anyone on the committee who had any question they'd like to ask these two wonderful panelists.
So, Mr. Liu, I'd love to make one connection here just with these two awesome educators here who have shared so much information. I think it hits home a really critical point of Blueprint that I know I can't say it often enough, so I'm going to say it again. The role of career counseling in the Blueprint is not an add-on. It's not an extra. It's not a bonus or this cool thing that they just put in at the end. It's actually central to the work of the Blueprint. And I think you heard that in this conversation between our guests today and the work that's being done in the schools. CCR can't exist in a vacuum. It connects to what comes next in a student's life. And that's what Blueprint's goal is, this through line of let's get our students at 4 years old or even 3 years old, and let's get them on track right away. And let's keep them on track all along so that they graduate on track, so that they enter the next phase of their life on track. And at the end of the day, our education system exists for a whole lot of reasons. There's a whole lot of them. But one of those is that they leave our K-12 system to move on to career and or college. At the end of the day, they're going to end up in their careers. The role of career counseling here that we've heard so much about and what's being done cannot be understated. And so I think that sometimes it's the side story, and I'm happy to tell you that it's a critical story that the AIB is going to be telling this year. We're getting ready to meet with each of our LEAs and each of our county partners around the career counseling work. And one of the 2 tasks that we're focusing on is telling the story of career counseling. What is actually happening in this work? It is a critical component of the full picture of achieving the Blueprint's goal. That in Maryland, if you've done research on our economy and research on the businesses, there's high need for skilled workers here. We need to be graduating a lot of students ready to enter our workforce market and to succeed immediately. And so this career counseling initiative is designed to intentionally help students identify their interests, identify their strengths, ensure that their academic preparation is putting them on track to be able to be a contributing part of our economy soon after they graduate or after they complete their post-secondary training. So I just really want to take a minute and celebrate what Kathy and Loree have shared with us and tell you that these are 2 leaders and two districts that are really collaborating well with their partners. They're talking with their community colleges. They're talking with their workforce boards. They're maximizing the wealth of knowledge and expertise that each of the 3 partners bring to career counseling, because what workforce knows is entirely different than what school systems know, is entirely different than what 2- and 4-year colleges know. Everybody knows their thing, but man, when you put them in a room and you say, we've got these kids that are interested in welding, and the school system doesn't have enough welding seats, but we've got 40 kids sitting here who raised their hands and said, I want to learn to weld. And the partners all sit there together and say, you know what? The welding market is saturated right now. We actually don't need welders, but what we need are these underwater welding people, which, by the way, a year ago I knew nothing about. But there are these underwater welding people that have to get this super special training. And the community college says, hey, we might be able to stand up an underwater welding program for 2 groups of 20 kids. When you put those people in the room together, I didn't know as a school system employee that underwater welding was this super important thing. The workforce teams know that, the colleges know that. They're able to take kids that have these interests in these programs and to create pathways for them. So we're now at the place where we're starting to see the power of the partnerships between all of the different agencies that work within Blueprint and in the actual boots on the ground roles, that when you put these people together in a room and you let them talk about what students need, where students are struggling, that we maximize the money going into education at K-12, at community college, and at the 4 years. And not everything comes down to money. It comes down to who knows what, who knows where a resource is, who knows that there's a federal grant, because most of our workforce boards operate under federal funds, and they've got grant money sitting there that they can put to an 11th grader, or they can partner with a business and find an apprenticeship opportunity that we didn't even know we needed until all of a sudden these kids raised their hands and said, I'm really interested in this thing. And we've got these experts in workforce and in higher ed and in our K-12 systems who work together to make it all happen. So I keep saying that 2026 is like the year of Blueprint. Like to date, it's like the most fun year because things are getting deeper. The partnerships and the relationships are really starting to expand, and we're starting to allow people to bring forth everything that they have and know. As you heard here from Loree and from Kathy, it's pretty cool when you get boots on the ground and see what this looks like for our students and for our partners and for all of the people that are doing this work together. So I want to give a huge shout out to all of the folks that are connected to Pillar 3 and who are looking at the academic programming from K to 12, but also those connections that we're talking about here that lead us to on track in 10th grade, lead us to post CCR pathways, and lead us to the career counseling that is helping getting our kids thinking about their future at a much, much earlier age. And I believe that there's a huge tie to that to Pillar 4 with chronic absenteeism. If I feel excited by the classes that I'm going to take or by the apprenticeship that I want to go to, okay, I got to visit a school on the shore. And for the record, I live in Anne Arundel County, and artificially inseminating a pig never happened in my life. Never, ever happened in my life. The day that I spent over on the shore and saw a group of 10 or 12 kids first practice on a fake pig, which was enough for me emotionally to see that, but then go out back and artificially inseminate a pig, that experience, they want to come to school that day. I bet you attendance was really, really perfect in that class. They're not missing that day. When their classes and their courseworks and their experiences are engaging to them, they get to school. And so I think that the connections that you drew in this meeting tonight between all students and Pillar 4 is a really, really powerful conversation that we need to have. And just a huge shout out to all of the people across the state who for 3 years had to figure it out. And it's been a hard thing to figure out. Like, what do you do? What do we do? Who pays for what? There've been a lot of logistics, but what it's translating to right now is we've got a group of kids who want this. We've got a group of kids who need this. And workforce and colleges saying, we've got an employer who needs this or who can offer you this. Do you have a kid who wants this? So I think it's just a really powerful time that we're now, I think, Amy, earlier to your question about like, how do we know what's working well in the different counties, and how do we spotlight those things so that people can get more ideas and share the strategies? I don't think Anne Arundel County really has a need to artificially inseminate pigs. That's probably not our work over here. We don't have a whole lot of, we do have some farms, but that's probably not going to happen here. But there are other things and strategies that we can borrow from. Now's the time to start hearing what's happening around the state and to showcase a lot of that. So we do have some plans underway for that. We've put out a Blueprint Communications guide for all of our partners around career counseling, and you're going to start seeing these stories all year. You're going to see them in our newsletter. We're going to start getting some news attention on them because really great things are happening, and we do want people to know that. So I will tell you that we have just under 400 career counselors in the state who are working with nearly 500,000 students. And so do the math of that, and it's a little complicated, but they are having personal one-on-one conversations that are engaging students in their education and helping them think about, you got to pass algebra so that we can get you into this program over here. It's all connected. So really great things happening out there, and I appreciate the conversation around this tonight. One thing I also want to mention, Mr. Liu, is that we will have a fair amount of data that we'll be putting out so that people can click through and access those. If you want to see those 9th grade trackers, any data I mentioned, we will add to that. We will add a slide of data resources that you can click on and see anything that we collect, and then also the graduation rates and the other things that I mentioned that the feds collect. That will be in the website on tonight's meeting through the meeting agenda, that you'll be able to access that information.
Awesome, Rachel. Thank you for that now. And Marie, Dr. Go, thank you guys both so much again for being here, sharing your expertise, your perspective. We always run out of time. I wish you could come longer, but I just want to thank you guys so much. Yeah,
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
you are welcome to sign off if you wish, because Amy's going to lead the next part of the agenda for some logistical items.
Thank you so much. So as we think about moving forward and our topic area for March and April, we're going to start planning the areas of focus 2 months at a time, just given the logistics and when we want to look for and invite speakers. It's a little bit easier to do it in 2-month increments. And I want to pull up our list of topics that we had already brainstormed previously, and I'll put this in the chat. Some of these we've been keeping track in terms of how they've morphed, how we've tackled them, so fiscal accountability, but we're also keeping these topics in here in case it's time to circle back and think about revisiting some of these topics. So I'm going to jump us, feel free, I put the link in the chat, feel free to poke around in here, but this was such a powerful meeting in bringing and bridging several of the pillars together that I almost wonder if we keep moving in that direction. So one of the areas of interest that we've been talking about is how blueprint implementation gets factored into system level evaluation. So getting to much of that data collection, Rachel, that you were mentioning. Another could be around, and Dr. Prem, I think of you and Crystalline when I think of teacher preparation programs with Pillar 2. And, you know, when I went through a teacher preparation program and I was a teacher, we really weren't talking about college and career readiness. And I wonder, as we're thinking about where we're hoping students go and how they are prepared for beyond K-12, what does that mean for teacher preparation? How is that work around college and career preparation being spiraled back into teacher preparation programs? Or how does teacher preparation and the blueprint pillar come together? So those are just to kind of get our brainstorming going. Not to say that those are topics we need to tackle in March and or April, but just wanted to throw those out there and give you a chance to raise a few areas that you are interested in exploring and unpacking.
So I think it's a great idea. One of the things that came to my head, and I think I brought it up in a previous meeting, that I met with some veteran teachers, because I'm not from Maryland originally. And I met with some veteran teachers, and they talked about how there was a pipeline from some of the high schools to the local colleges for students who wanted to be teachers. So even just bringing in some of those things and kind of seeing what still exists, but I think it's a great idea and I think it's a great topic.
Yeah, I agree. Kind of trying to turn it around in my head to see what specific aspect of it we could focus on in light of blueprint. But we could probably think through that.
And I wonder if Mike would be, you know, if we could have like a current principal, Crystalline, you kind of representing the teacher voice, both from a recent teacher, you could bring in the veteran teacher voices, and then Glenda, you're from, Glenda, you bring in the teacher prep program, but also Crystalline, you're doing current teacher preparation. Is that right? You're an adjunct professor as well.
Yeah, that's correct. I know Maryland right now, of course, we have the like build your teacher pipeline sort of program. So even just getting in contact with some of those people, I think it'd be cool to just kind of see what's happening across the state. And of course, we have Fed to Ed here in Maryland and a couple of other things. So all of those things have been used to build the teacher pipeline. So even just connecting with people who are kind of course, we're doing it because the colleges received a lot of that grant funding. But even just some people who are over it, I think that would be cool to kind of bring them in and speak about it as well.
And a number of school districts are looking to start grow your own programs. And that might be, we might be able to conceptualize a session around what that might look like. in
Mhm.
collaboration with IHEs.
Mhm.
In Frederick County, we have had a Grow Your Own program. We started with our ESSER money for COVID-19, was focused on special educators, SEIAs who wanted to become special educators, and then also growing BCBAs. Because that's been kind of important, but board certified behavioral analysts to support the special education program. So we've had some success with that. We also, at our CTC, our Career and Technology Center, we have a TAM program, so the Teacher Academy of Maryland, and it's been long standing. So it's interesting because that might, and I'm sure the other counties have those as well, right? So that gives you the high schooler who's considering it, and then the Grow Your Own is somebody who has a career and has made a commitment to pursue. And we focus on special education because that's where we have critical shortages. Um, and so it's been pretty successful for us. But it's, of course, finding the funding to continue to supporting it now that the ESSER grants have gone away. But the state has started some of their Grow Your Own as well that I think a lot of counties are looking into.
I think from an accountability standpoint, MLDS is getting ready to launch basically a teacher website that is tracking all of this data around, it's called Teacher Claw. So I think understanding where there is existing data, where there's gaps in data around sort of what these pipelines are. I think to the earlier points, MSDE is launching an apprenticeship, some funding and some really structured programming around building apprenticeships with some of our higher ed partners. Their Grow Your Own grant is $19 million to help districts do that. So there's the funding for it. So I think just having a better idea of how that will be tracked and like what that, sort of what the outcomes will be, instead of just people sort of saying what they're doing from an accountability measure, to sort of look at what data do we have and what data do we need.
Yeah, that's a great framing for the conversation. And I was actually thinking, I wonder if before we dive into the teacher pipeline, if it would be beneficial for us in March to really do a dive into the data that are available, especially from an accountability standpoint, because then that helps drive some of the conversation and the agenda for the teacher pipeline, teacher preparation. We could pull in the data conversation, but I think just from sorry, this is where I show my bias. I'm a data person and I really am curious about what is available that we can ask questions around, and where does additional information either would be beneficial to the accountability, would be beneficial to the conversation, would be beneficial to understand how implementation is going, etc. So
I think if those are your questions, I think you probably want to speak to Ann Kellogg from MLDS, who sort of oversees that. And then I think, the Maryland, across the state of Maryland, there is the Maryland Education Deans Council. And so, and Glenda's certainly a part of that. Every single education dean across the state of Maryland comes together on a regular basis to discuss, everything that's going on with teacher preparation. And so we have two chairs, a chair who is from the independent schools and a chair who is from the, sort of public state schools. And so, inviting those chairs to then give you more, like once you have sort of this big data picture, the chairs would be able to share, sort of that, what's happening in the individual schools. And if you know what you want to ask, then we can send out the information to them and get information back so the chairs are well prepared to answer your questions.
Got it.
I think that's good, Jennifer. I think if we prepare some questions around data around the teacher pipeline, and then we could have representatives from MLDS, from the higher ed, from the IHEs, from the deans and directors group, who could respond to those questions. That would be a useful session, I think.
Do we think, Rachel, could we do a deep dive into the data that are available in March and then plan this session around teacher prep for your own for April? I almost want to split it though. I almost want to do grow your own separate from teacher pipelines just to see, but I don't know if that would
I think
be
they're
enough.
the same thing.
No,
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I would also consider adding apprenticeship, just so we know that that's a growing thing
Absolutely.
here,
Mhm.
and that we've got some really neat things happening around it, with several districts that are trying it. And
Yeah.
I think actually pushing that out a teeny bit, the LEAs were given an opportunity to apply for, I believe, a grant through MSDE. And so once we know who gets that and who's applied, I think giving a little bit of time for that to get underway, if that's April or May even. Well, and then remember that we do need to save one of the meetings for the Blueprint feedback session for after session ends and thinking about the comprehensive plan, any updates that are needed. So that's something to put on the team's radar as well. There's still a lot of snow on the ground out here, but you're talking about spring dates what you're right now. That another conversation will be coming in May, likely, where our whole team will join and you'll have public join to give those 3-minute thoughts on what might change in the Blueprint Comprehensive Plan. That ties back to the question you asked me about the 9th grade tracker. Is that a recommendation that the Pillar 5 committee might say, like, hey, we reviewed the 9th grade tracker this year. We're wondering, is there an opportunity to deepen the questions? That could be, something that the Pillar 5 committee considers, not just for 9th grade tracker, but any of those data questions that you brought up tonight. That's a very valuable use of the advisory committees to take a look at these topics and think, how does it apply to the BCP updates and revisions? So you got an extra thought in there for me on that one. But I do think that those topics, that makes a lot of sense. I probably would do it in that order, with the data and then the teacher focus, just because there's so much underway. And then, Dr. Prime, you mentioned your MAT program. I know there's several colleges around the state that launched some new things this year. I heard Feds to Ed mentioned as well earlier, but there's a lot of things happening. And even if we take this to Pillar 1, there's a lot of things happening in Pillar 1 around teacher certification, where maybe Pillar 5 has that bigger picture look of how that interfaces across the pillars. Teacher certification, as well as, the big part of Pillar 1 is high quality programming, which means high quality TAs. And so we need to make sure that there's a pipeline of TAs. And I'm doing some things with workforce right now to see how even our workforce partners can help with that, because some of our districts are really struggling there. And so again, a Pillar 5 connection where they come together on those areas that we might be able to add to the teacher prep side of it when we get there, is a Pillar 1 connection to the high quality requirements.
Right. Does that work for everyone?
I would note we're missing a couple of our members tonight, so it might be good to, if we could pass this around in an email and see if they want to add to any of the topics, or if they have some other thoughts that might expand the topics that we've connected about. I think we're missing a couple of people.
All right. Well, with that note, we can do that, and then Dr. Prime and Crystalline, Lou and I will reach out to you to set up a planning meeting. Jennifer, do you want to be part of that as well as we start to craft the agenda?
Yeah, I'm happy to look it over for you.
Okay.
I sit in this space as an AIB board member, just happen to wear a couple other hats. So I'm happy to certainly take a peek at that for you, but I wouldn't be representing in that capacity.
Got it. Okay. That is helpful to keep in mind, and we appreciate you looking over the agenda to make sure we're leveraging all that we can and should for the meeting. All right. Well, without further ado, we'll say goodnight and enjoy the snow, because I hope it melts in the next couple of days. Have a great night,
conversation.
everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Get well, Rachel.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.